Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel, co-host of Escape from the City on the ABC, and partner of Empower Wealth Advisory. Ben Kingsley, chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of Empower Wealth Advisory, named the 2018 and 2019 Property Advisory Firm of the Year. Stay tuned as they bring you the insider's guide to property, finance and money management.
All right, folks, welcome back to the Property Couch and welcome back to you too. Geez, I know your face.
Benji. Benji.
Oh, mate, that was so embarrassing. I forgot your name. I knew your face, but I just said, mate, hello, welcome back. How are you?
Oh, look, pumped to be back. Absolutely pumped. I have no idea what's been happening, but pumped to be back.
Well, welcome back, mate. You've been missed. I hope you didn't listen to any of the episodes that I had other co-hosts, because I had a little pot shot at you, said the benchmark for co-hosting is not that high and all that sort of stuff. So hopefully you didn't hear any of that. But
I heard it all, and I couldn't agree more.
Of course, it was tongue in cheek, mate. Very, very excited to have you back. Very excited to chat to you today. We'll get a little postcard update from you shortly. But apart from you being back, since you've been gone, we had a winter series, Ben. That was fabulous fun, yep. And we had August, and we've now ticked over into September. But I just want to do a little special thanks again to Julia, Brad, Amelia, and Simon for co-hosting with me in your absence. And
thank you.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Welcome back anytime. Sub me out anytime you want to again, crew. Very happy.
Mate, today's your second day back and you're already looking to duck off for another 8 weeks, are you?
Oh, look, if that's on the table, I'll take it.
No, mate, we'll see how today goes. Let's give you a rating at the end of the day and see if you
sure. Okay, sounds good.
See if you live. Hey, tell us, mate, you've just spent 8 weeks away. What was your favourite memory?
Oh God, so many. Look, the different experiences in different locations. So I'll run through the itinerary. Started in Darwin, moved through Litchfield, then down into Mataranka and across to Kakadu, then down through Katherine, across to Kununurra, Lake Argyle, then across to the Gibb River Road to do Home Valley, then Alquestro, came back through to do the Bungle Bungles, and then basically moved into through Halls Gap and Fitzroy Crossing, and then across into Derby, and then down to Broome. And finished in Broome, did a couple of trips out of Broome. So yeah, just different experiences in different locations. I was joking about the amount of rock, like it's one word to describe the Kimberley, it's just rock. And that's on the roads that you're driving, or that's just in the escarpments and the amazing views of the different sort of ranges. It's just seriously crazy in terms of, you've got 10 million year old ferns in river systems and gorges. And so I couldn't, in terms of what I was looking for in the trip, obviously it was spectacular. It was obviously very busy because, no one's traveling overseas. So, and it was the hottest dry in 28 years. So it was a pretty warm trip. Most nights you're sort of still, by the time you're going to bed, because you're getting up at sort of 5 a.m. to do your bushwalks and your gorge walks and checking things out, but you're sort of eating around sort of 6:37 and you're in bed by 8 o'clock. And then normally, the cool air and temperature drops sort of after 8, 9 o'clock. And so sleeping becomes reasonably comfortable. A couple of nights it was, sort of 25, 26 in the camper trailer, which was a bit warm. A couple of nights we got,
Do you have a cooling system in
it? yeah, that's called, basically the flywire.
Well, my camper trailer's got an air conditioner. And I looked at Andrew and went, "Are you serious?" And she's like,
"Camper trailer got air conditioning. That's very clever." Yeah. But you can seal your sides up, whereas this was all just canvas, right? So it's not
Right.
So it's a proper camper trailer. We wrestled with mozzies in Mary River. That was quite interesting. They were thick, That's the word I'd use. So that was an interesting night up there. Settled down after that. We got a little bit more organised to plug all the gaps in the camper trailer, because you'd kill everything in there, and then 5 minutes later you'd be attacked by mozzies again. But yeah, on the whole, we were lucky. Mechanically, the cars performed really well. The trailer didn't rip a suspension, didn't do any tyres. We did about 6,500 K.
Wow.
So it was it was a special.
And you waited till you're 50 to do that, but your boys were 9 and 11. What do you think? What do you think their experience of that? What would they be thinking right now?
So can I set that up? So expectation versus reality. So I had this sort of vision in my mind that they'd be soaking up the atmosphere, really ingrained in sort of the nature and just basically in the moment.
Yeah.
How would I describe it? A little bit of that until not another sunset, not another gorge, and probably rating their experience by some of the pools in the caravan parks that we checked into from here and there, and how many mates they made.
Yeah.
So their journal reads like, this is where we went today. Had a great time. Met Simon and John. Swam in the pool.
Yeah.
There was nothing about what an amazing gorge, Emma Gorge. We trekked up. We saw a snake on the path. We had to wait for the snake to pass. Nothing. Just basically the water was cold.
Pools and mates.
The pool was amazing.
Oh, nice. Well, that sounds
like you get that. I think later in life they'll appreciate it.
They'll appreciate it. Well, I'll probably just get the chance to hang out with their parents for that long was bittersweet as well, right? But we probably could blow this out by 30 minutes just on that.
Yeah, no, but I think hopefully they'll appreciate it in later life. I know when my parents took me on an extensive trip to America when I was 13, it's more at the time it was still pretty incredible, but I was probably more. I look back now and think about Grand Canyon and Yosemite National Park and all of these incredible places. So I mean, I think from my point of view, I'd do it in a heartbeat again. It was that good.
Mate, sounds fabulous. Look forward to unpacking those stories with you over the coming weeks and months. But generally speaking, mate, welcome back. Looking forward to today. Q&A day. Thought I'd give you a nice little lay up into the podcasting world today. We'll see how you go, see if you're rusty or not. But
I will be. So you're going to have to hold my hand, right? I don't even know what's been going on, so I'm getting back into it now.
Yeah. All right. Well, again, we got a score at the end of the podcast, so we'll let you know how we go. We'll get Stiggy and the crew here to let us know. But hey, my mindset minute theme today is. You've heard the saying around, you are the average of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. So a little variation on that I saw recently on Lisa Bilyeu's socials, I thought was good, was some people are investments and others are bills, and you need to know the difference. So know who to invest your time with and who to close your account with. I thought, well, that's actually a good way to think about it, right? And so the challenge is for folks listening to this, and obviously people who listen to podcasts generally have a growth mindset anyway. So which of the people that you're spending time with are the investments, and which of the people that you're spending time are the bills? And is it time for you to close the account with any of those bills? So interesting take on it, Ben. I thought well worth setting up, mate, just for the record.
Nice financial flavour to it, mate.
You like that? You see what
I
I did there?
like that. I like it. I like it a lot.
And just for the record, mate, you're at this stage, you're an investment. And I'll let you know if you're a bill by the end of the
I'm sure I will be.
End of the podcast. No, that's not true. Hey, so first question today, I've got a bunch of speak pipes lined up for a
Q&A day.
Q&A day, yep. But the first one is actually a message that I received on Instagram from Aaron Wynn, and it was regarding a conversation that we had with Simon last week around the scrambled egg versus the fried egg. Yep. And so his question, I'll read the question out and then we can unpack it. But in regards to the unyoking of major cities, and for those folks who haven't listened to last week, the fried egg with the yolk in the middle was traditional pre-COVID, where everyone went to the city centre. And then as a result of COVID, we've become a scrambled egg where people are moving out and there's not so much concentration in the middle. So in regards to the unyoking of the major cities, what do you think that does to inner city suburb housing prices into the future? Do you think that the appeal of these suburbs could start to reduce a bit and the property values will follow, or at least slow in terms of growth? And that's a really good question, Aaron. And I've toyed with it myself. We've had plenty of people ask that question. And if it's a case of the last person leaving the CBD, could they turn the lights out? If that was the case, it would be served. It would manifest itself if there was heaps of properties for sale out in the regions, but there's not. And it's also the fact that in the capital cities, there's not a lot of properties for sale either. So you have low supply, demand still strong, and there is a contingency of people moving out. So at the moment, you haven't seen any, as I said, manifestation of that, because property prices are held firm. And if you read the newspapers and follow the market, you'll see that it's very, very strong. So the big question is, okay, well, it hasn't happened now, but will it happen in the medium to long term? And I think that's a great question, Ben. Do you have any insights?
Yeah, I do. I mean, ultimately, if that is the case, because this is something that I've thought about pre-pandemic anyway, right? I mean, ultimately, what we do know, and this is not just in Australia, but in all other major centres where there's established infrastructure and established lifestyle drivers and employment opportunities to earn a higher income, is that we find that the land values in those areas are at a premium. And so if we're arguing that the land values in regional areas or outer city areas will outstrip the land values of the city areas, I'm not sure that will play out. So like the logic says to me that if I can buy say 700 square metre block in a suburb that's say 25 kilometres from the CBD for $500,000, but I can buy a 700 square metre block 3 kilometres from the CBD for $500,000. The logic tells me that the buyer, based on the buyer's decision quadrant and human behaviour, will be looking for the greater gift of infrastructure and amenity, whether that be restaurants, bars, lifestyle, cultural aspects, convenience to travel. Because while we mightn't be driving to the city every day, and we might do some of our thinking work and solitary work at home, some of us might do that. I think longer term, we are very much social creatures, and we're seeing a bit of that now, right, in terms of these lockdown stories that we've got, where basically people are a little bit, over it, and they want their lives back. And part of that, as being social animals, is very much part of what they get, and they get a lot of that through their work environments as well. So I can see the opportunity to consider what would happen to land values in those areas, but I can't see how the productivity of the land will be more valuable out wide compared to valuable closer to a city centre. I suspect you're going to see, like for example, Melbourne, which is Australia's biotech hub and knowledge centre, one of two. Sydney's our financial capital, but Melbourne's very much our educational and biotech and science capital. That when you're looking for talent and you're attracting talent to a city, that's basically where those higher income jobs are going to be. So I think from that point of view, I don't see that changing anytime soon. In terms of the next 100+ years.
I think you raised a good point about infrastructure, but I think some of these questions are being posed in people's minds in a vacuum, where the only decision is a lifestyle driver. I want to escape from the city because I want to be able to go for a walk by the beach, and that's a realistic thing. And you and I know people who've done that, Ben. So
yeah, absolutely.
Our very own, one of our teammates has done that as well. So, but the thing is, I can tell you from lived experience, my sister turns 50. She born the same year as you, Ben. She turns 50 in October. I can't go home and meet with her for her 50th because of the pandemic. But so that's a big event. But I can't have birthday lunch with her for a 49th or a 51st. I have this enormous burn in me that my kids don't get to grow up with my side of the family. So there is this human component that needs to be factored as well. So if I'm in the city and I'm going, right, I'm out of here, just get me in the car, get the stuff in the back, and I'm heading straight for the regions, it doesn't take into account the fact that there are other things that will keep you drawn back to the city, like the fact that you have a Sunday roast with the family, or Tuesday night dinner with the family, the fact that the grandparents can come and watch your kids actually play football on the weekend, or ballet, or whatever the activities are. That stuff is stuff in my own lived experience that I have a burn that I missed. And that's stuff that people need to consider. So whether it's a case of everyone just going, well, this pandemic's just causing me to just get out of here. There's so much more, because what if you're the only person out of your family unit and you haven't moved? I can tell you there's disruption from moving. I've done a show where people want to escape from the city, Ben, and people get to the 11th hour and then they pull the trigger. They don't pull the trigger, sorry, because of all of these other things. I've got to find a new network. I know where my dentist is right now. I know for me, Ben, I know which aisle has the gluten-free pasta that I love in that shop, versus going to a new and finding all that stuff. So I think my advice here is to resist that people don't make these decisions in a vacuum. There's a whole range of stuff going on. And if we go back to last week, Simon talked about the commuter belt. There does come a point where the commuter belt gets exceeded, and to think about that, because even what you just said then before, what if I have a job that allows me to work from home, but I need to be in Sydney 2 or 3 times a month? Well, if you're in if you're in Mildura or Warrnambool or somewhere that's not, you've got to think about how you get to the airport for a 6 o'clock flight to be in Sydney so that you can be at that 8:30, 9 o'clock meeting, what that sort of has. So these are not vacuum decisions that real humans need to make.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more in the sense, and I can add some further flavour to that. Like we also know of examples where people who have rented in a city for many years and have really come to love the conveniences of going down and getting their morning coffee and bacon and eggs and also the vibe that they get, only to move out to the burbs and basically just it's a different lifestyle out in the burbs to what it is when you're living in a city, right? So and all of a sudden they're like, well, this is not for me, right? I've got to get in the car to go to the Thai restaurant, which is 4 kilometers away, and it's in a food court or on the fringe of a shopping center and so forth. So the urban designers are trying to cultivate these types of city centers and lifestyle elements, but we haven't seen them as successful as what they are, where they just organically grow in the areas like Paddington and North Shore and even sort of Brunswick, those types of areas, Melbourne Park, Middle Park, and those types of things. So there's that, and there's a final point to that, which was around there will be businesses that will require their staff to come in every day. Small businesses, big businesses that will basically make policy. So when you are thinking about the choice of moving wide or regional, that might work now for the current job that you're in. But we also know through the data that where our parents might have had 1 or 2 jobs and 1 or 2 careers, our generation had sort of 3 to 5 careers. And I think the new numbers are 10 plus opportunities, right? Where people are moving, and obviously digitization of the world is going to change job opportunities, and automation is going to do a few things there as well. So you're going to have better choices in a bigger employment area than what you are in the regions. And so if you've got a boss or a business that's very comfortable with you working remotely, that's great. But if you're looking for career advancement and there's no other opportunity inside that business, you may be limited in terms of the next opportunity that you take. So with all of that consideration en masse, because please don't make me thinking if our listeners are saying, well, that doesn't apply to me or whatever, that could be true, right? That could be absolutely true. And lifestyle is more important than that could be true as well. But I'm just letting you know that basically when you are talking about pressure on demand in certain locations and land and property appreciation, which is where the question started, the vast majority of people the bulk of the numbers will be inside and wanting to live in those bigger urban centres. And that's what we're relying on in terms of understanding future capital growth.
I've been asked from journalists through this pandemic, Ben, what do they think about the escape to the regions? The commuter belt, that's Simon's term. I called it fringe commutable, but he said the commuter belt. That was the big unknown for me. Once you pass the commuter belt, what does that actually mean? Because my answer to Aaron here is I think there's opportunity for both, because at some point in time we will also have more people wanting to move back into the cities. Obviously, not in a pandemic world right now. So I think up to the commuter belt, you can have growth in both. Like I know in my own LGA here, it's just gone nuts. But we've got, we've got the home of surfing down here. The lifestyle is off the charts here. But in other parts that don't have the same level of lifestyle, I'm still not sure, because as you go further out, you get more land. So as people come, it's easier to create supply. It's a bit like the donut theory of, don't go into the first kilometre of a major CBD because there's unlimited supply in the sky. As you go further out, you've got supply challenges once you get past that commuter belt as well, and the infrastructure that comes with it. So I think there's an opportunity for both. I don't see prices just dropping flat. I think evidence suggests that there's been growth, but I think if we get more listings, I don't see it going flat. But I don't necessarily feel confident outside of the commuter belt for the medium to long term. That's the unknown for me, and I don't stand here with a firm view on it either. I just think that is a red flag for me, and it's something that I'm not prepared to put my own money into outside of that commuter belt.
Yeah, and I think that's sensible, right? I really do think that, because again, coming back to that guarantee of income and guarantee of employment, I think is going to play a big role. But we also don't want to lose sight of the fact that our population forecasts for the late part of the Roaring 20s, pre-pandemic, was obviously moving towards that 35 million for sort of 35 by 2030, 2035. I suspect immigration is going to play an enormous role over the course of the next decade, and so those people who are coming into Australia, where are they coming from? What are their preferences? Where are their opportunities? Where do they want to make good? Where do they want to prove to their family that it was the right decision to make in terms of, the success that they have and the aspirations that they have for changing to Australia? So I think, again, you might see a 10%, 15% of those moving to the regions, but the vast majority of them are probably going to be in the big employment hubs. And it is, like anything, businesses who employ people, there is there's always a challenge for talent, and we're all competing to get the best people into our businesses. So I think that won't change, and I think those incomes will continue to grow as we get challenged for those, for that talent pool.
Great question, Aaron. Unyoking of major cities. Hopefully that helps. Let us know if you have any follow-up queries from that. And hopefully that's helped you to community if you had a similar question from last week. Next one is, I didn't catch the name on SpeakPipe, but it's a related question. So let's have a little listen to this question now.
Hey guys, big fan of the show. So I'm 26 years old and I'm currently looking to invest in a property, but Melbourne's getting a bit too expensive. So I was thinking regional Victoria, so around Ballarat, Bendigo or Geelong. And my friends were thinking the same thing as well. I just was wondering what you thought about that. Thanks.
Hey Ben, millennials are thinking about going out into the regions because Melbourne's too expensive in this case. But it's obviously a related question to the previous one, but it's interesting that people are looking outside the square, given the fact that affordability in the major population centres is becoming a challenge.
Yeah, there's no doubt for a good portion of the population, affordability is going to be a challenge over the course of the next decade and beyond, right? I mean, Australia is a very wealthy country, a very successful country. We are very blessed to be here. So you have a combination of a population that has a high net worth and family wealth. So we call it the family office wealth. So we'll see those children who grew up more fortunate than others being supported by the bank of mum and dad. And there will be that still a sustainable demand in those inner city areas, but there absolutely is going to be a massive challenge for people around saving that first deposit. And so if they don't get the bank of mum and dad in terms of a security guarantee, they're going to be looking at alternative markets. And so it's only logical that we'll see and it's showing up more evidently today than what it would if we did have immigration open and we were seeing those 350,000 people arriving into Australia. So we're seeing this pocket of millennials. It's very hard to gauge the level of demand, but it's enough combined with the more mature sort of 30 to 50 something people who are also working out is city life for them versus the regional lifestyle drivers, considering they can commute to work. So those two combinations are pushing demand higher into those areas. So I have no problems in recommending over the long term the Ballarats, the Bendigos, the Geelongs, the Wollongongs, the Newcastles, the Hunter, the Southeast Queensland story, even the Adelaide story, because that's sort of more like a large regional town, Goulburn, the Albury Wodonga sort of areas. They will do okay because they also have a baby boomer population, which are also potentially moving out there, cashed up with access to super. So that's not a long-term thing, but as Simon points out, that's what you do want to look at. You want to look at basically the population graph, which shows the movement of big groups of population and what are their interests and what they were doing, right? Caravans for the retirees are a big thing at the moment. So that's what you're looking for. So I get that Melbourne, Sydney are going to be very, very difficult areas to save for a deposit. So we want to do, and from the show's point of view and the education we want to do over the course of the next couple of years, we'll be doing some work with the millennials and sort of talking about opportunities in terms of how you get a foot on the ladder as part of that. So for me, it's real, and making those considerations and potentially building those communities out for those younger people is a thing.
Episode 302, we interviewed Scott Keck, and that's a masterclass on Melbourne and Greater Victoria. So I think that is actually something that I'd recommend if you haven't listened to that particular episode. That'll help here, because Scott talks about, and you've just experienced, Ben, you've just been through Western Australia. You've seen an enormous amount of ground, and you stopped at Broome, right? And then that doesn't even take into account all the way down to Albany, right? So it's a big state, whereas Victoria is not a big state compared to the others. It's actually quite small. So to think that we won't get more spread out as a super, like Sunshine Coast to the border is a big super city in southeast Queensland. Well, Melbourne has a variation of that anyway. It's got good train infrastructure, it gets people out. So these are not necessarily like the suburbs that you've picked there, Ballarat, Bendigo, and Geelong. It's not like you need to stretch the imagination there. They've all got train lines. Geelong's already gone berserk, and there's just subdivision after subdivision after subdivision around there anyway. So these are opportunities for people. And there's a related question coming up as well, around yield and income on lower price properties. But I think as a 26-year-old, I think you should well and truly be considering these areas, because you can get on the ladder, you can create some lifestyle, and then you need to be creative on how you get into the market, because the commentary around the property market now is it's not showing any signs of overheating from the pandemic or the shutdowns or anything like that. It's just saying we're starting to reach affordability ceilings. So it's just a fact, and it's kind of a podcast update alert too, Ben, because we have very loyal community who've listened to every single episode. We've had some write into us and say they've done 2 and 3 laps, right? Well, if you circle back to the first 100 episodes, we said buy in Melbourne and Sydney if you can, and what's making property news is going to...
We'll just read our book and have a look at the price ranges that we quote in the book, right? It's okay.
But even at the beginning of the podcast, we're saying you need to be near the capital cities. So sometimes a client will come to us and say, well, what's going on now in the podcast? Yeah, well, that was 6 years ago. Yeah. The market has actually moved. So we've got to be able to pivot. So it's one, we still firmly believe that the higher land value areas are where the growth exists and you get an outperform result. But entry level is now in some of those suburbs 7 figures. When we were talking about them, they were nowhere near 7 figures. So we have to pivot and And so what I like about this question is, instead of sort of saying Melbourne's too expensive and sit in the corner and get stroppy, it's like, well, okay, well that's the truth. So what do we do to pivot? And I think the gold in this is the pivot and where we're looking and opening opportunities. So good question. Yes, those areas are well and truly on the radar, but also in other states, as Ben did a quick fly around of other states, there's opportunities there as well. So that next one is from Ross. Good question too. Let's have a little listen.
G'day guys, love the podcast, love the books, and like probably a lot of people who get in contact with you, wish I found you 10 or 15 years ago. Anyway, my name's Ross, I'm 42. I work as a mechanic, so I only make about 52 grand a year before tax. Me and my wife have twin girls who are 7, and my wife is a teacher, but she's not working full-time at the moment, just doing casual relief teaching at the moment and looking to get back into it full-time in maybe 2, 3 or 4 years' time. My question is, she says we should wait until she's working full-time to look at an investment property. I say, let's do it now because I'm excited and I want to get in the market. But our household income is not very much. Obviously, mine being 52 grand, she makes around about 20 or 30 grand, just depending, before tax every year. But yeah, my question mainly is there a minimum amount of household income that we should be making before we should start an investment property portfolio? We own our own home. We owe 100 grand on our own home loan at the moment, and probably will have that paid off in a couple of years. But yeah, my main question is, do you think that we should wait, being on such low wages, until she's making more money, or can we go for it now?
Good question, Ben. I think we better be careful. We might be the deciding vote in this household.
It's one of my favourite questions because it just articulates the conversations that are going on into households where low income is there, right? So for those aspiring Australians who listen to this podcast, we are all about making your money work harder for you, right? So we spend a lot of time in teaching you how to control your money, trapping the surplus, and then basically putting that surplus to work. But like anything, it's also a life design podcast, meaning that we've got to try and match our personal goals with our financial goals, right? Money isn't everything. Wealth isn't everything. You've got to get that balance right. Now, what you have to do is make the invisible visible. And so in this particular case, you need to unpack your future spending plans. What's the plans for your twin girls in terms of schooling? How much of a burden is that going to have on the purse strings? And then also, yes, with your lovely wife in terms of returning to work to bring that income in. As a full-time teacher, my understanding that, those salaries would be 70 and beyond, up to, sort of 90 grand, depending on your grading or thereabouts, depending on which city or state or territory you live in. So that is where we can't give personal advice because we don't know that full picture. If we were doing a proper analysis, that's our starting point. We absolutely want to know the surplus cash, the buffers there. We love the fact that you've done great in terms of having equity in your home, and that you've basically got that money. Now, what we have taught our audience from day episode 1 is that cash on cash returns are far more superior in terms of sensible leverage on low volatile assets is where you'll accelerate your wealth creation. And as Ross points out, I wish I found you 10 or 15 years ago, that would have been a material difference to this household. In other words, if they could have got at least one investment property before they had a family, that property would have probably doubled in value based on pretty much any suburb that they would have bought in Australia, except for mining towns or something, really outback. So that's the sort of story we're telling here. And one of the, that is probably the biggest learning that people have around investing. And that is, if I had my time over again, what would be the one thing you change? Start earlier would be the question that most people say. So at 42, you still got a good amount of time. There's still 25 years of working income that we can put to work. So if we could prove that a household has some buffers and we can set some of those buffers up in the money that you would borrow as well. And depending on the level of lifestyle that you're living now, will determine whether you'll be able to invest or not. And I think that's just an exercise in doing those numbers. Property investing is really a game of numbers and a game of finance. So from that point of view, if I was talking to your wife, I'd want to, and we were sitting down, I would go through those numbers. We would work through those. We would build up confidence around what if scenarios. What happens if I didn't get a full-time job? What happens if we lost our job? And then basically making sure that we had those cash flow buffers that could accommodate a change in our story, that would at least give us buffers for a year or beyond. And in terms of what we buy, Bryce, I'll probably hand that over to you, right? Because I've been talking too much.
No, well, I think you say some really good points there, because buying an investment property is not just a snapshot in time. It's not, can I afford to settle on the property? It's just as important as, can I afford to hold the property, right? So that's important here. We've had a consistent mantra around, when should you buy your next investment property? When cash flow allows. What's not clear from this question is, do you live in Sydney? Do you live in Adelaide? Do you live in the regions? Because cost of living on someone on 52 grand in Sydney is not ideal. But if you're in a region with a low mortgage and cost of living is low, well, then it's fine. So it's, again, well, it could be fine. So the important thing here is, Ben said it before, property investing is a game of finance more than it's a game of bricks and mortar, right? So the answer to your question might not be whether or not you have the intent. It's also whether you have the capacity, because you might go to a bank and they might not lend you any money, or because you've got a 100K left on your mortgage, we don't know what the value of your house is. But if you're able to release some money for a buffer, well, that could change things, right? Because you don't want to be in a situation where your margins are so thin that some shock event, like a car breaking down or one of the kids needing an emergency dental repair or something like that, comes along, and all of a sudden you're so redlined and white knuckled that you can't actually do that. So again, the overarching answer to this question is, if cash flow allows, you might want to consider it sooner rather than later, because if you wait, well, then obviously the title of properties are going up in someone else's name, not yours. And so clearly you want to be able to accumulate that. But the fact that your wife has the capacity to add an extra 20 to 30 grand at a part-time level will improve the servicing, which will improve the ability to borrow the money. And so cash flow is super, super important for everyone listening to this question. It doesn't matter if you're on high income or low income. It matters what the cash flow is to actually be able to service it. And if you circle back to the previous question and some of the previous episodes, we generally say, all things being equal, chase growth first, chase balance second, and then chase income third to round out the portfolio. Well, this is a classic case where chasing growth first might not be possible. You might have to go for a balanced asset or one that has income so that you can improve the cash flow. That means that you can actually have the incremental growth that might come from the asset, but also allow you to get more borrowing capacity in 3 or 4 years' time, when your wife actually adds additional income to the business, to the family business, so that you could chase a growth asset. So there is no one size fits all answer to this, but hopefully we've sort of created some thinking in not only you, Ross, but everyone listening to it, that it's about making sure that you don't just settle on the property. You've got to be able to fund the property and all the things that Ben said. I think that's an important point. You've got to unpack future spending. And that is really critical here. So, Ross, I'm not sure we're going to help you with the family argument on whether you should or shouldn't, but I think getting super clear on how much surplus you do have, money smarts, so that you do actually know if your lifestyle is going to be adversely affected by adding leverage and a little bit of, clearly extra risk into the mix. If it does and you can't, I'd suggest you wait. If it does and you can, I'd suggest you strongly consider that. But that would, from our perspective, where we've been consistent across this whole podcast, we don't lick our finger and put it up to the wind. We get down into actual numbers and we make decisions based on actual projected numbers so that you can do that. So my encouragement to you is maybe get more clarity before you make a decision, Ross, because we need to go deeper on the detail. Good one. Appreciate it. Thanks for that question. Last one here, Ben, is from Rosie. This is an interesting one regarding properties and children. Let's have a little listen.
Our mother is 73 and she is a single mum who has worked hard all her life as a sole trader to be in a position to leave a property to each of her 3 children. She is finishing work soon and has decided that her children need these properties now at the most difficult time of their life with young kids. However, this means that she will not have these properties to live on when she's over the next 30 years. What advice would you give her? Having no superannuation, she's decided she wants to go on the pension, but is now realising the tax implications of gifting these properties.
Ben, good question. And also good to know that the kids are actually asking questions that are thinking about the mother here too, rather than just thinking about themselves. I think it's a good question. And there's a fair bit to unpack.
There's a lot to unpack here, and ultimately, when I first read this question, I was of the view, and I know the technical ways in which it can be done. So we'll get to those in a minute. But what I'm probably really interested in for Rosie's mother is around her future financial needs, right? Having no super and living off a pension, which if single person pension, we're sort of talking just under $20,000 a year. I'm more interested in the financial needs that she will have around her health. Mm-hmm. And then ultimately, final stages of life around what has been provisioned in regards to moving into potentially an aged care home and so forth. So we don't have a lot of detail there. So my views around that is we can't give sort of personal advice in this particular case because there's so many moving parts. But I'll get you to, you can unpack the technical components of that. But I'm of the view once we unpack some of the opportunities here, that to come back and have a conversation around what might be some of the options that households and families need to consider under these circumstances.
Good one. So again, just here's the disclaimer, folks. We are not financial planners. This is general, and do not rely on what we're saying here without taking professional advice. But what we did is we practiced what we preach. We went and spoke to our financial planning team. So there's a couple of things here to consider. First of all, capital gains tax implications. 2, any stamp duty on the transfer. 3, any loss of Centrelink pension entitlements around means testing. And the 4th thing is, we don't know if these properties are all paid off, but looks like worked hard. And let's just honor Rosie's mum. What a fabulous achievement to
wonderful
self-fund through her own business to get to this point for the kids. So what a remarkable character your mum has, Rosie. So first of all, let's just take a bow. But I guess in chatting with our team, there was an overarching, theme that came back, Ben, and it's an emotional discussion versus a financial discussion. And quite often, the lived experience of the team was most of the time the black and white of the numbers gets put aside because of the emotional connection that the parents have to wanting to do this for their kids. And so we're going to talk about that, and you're going to come to a conclusion shortly. But we're not in a vacuum here, because the parents aren't thinking, well, what is the most optimal technical, financial, beneficial interest for me? They're just thinking, I want to just help my kids. So that's part of it here. But typically the parents in practice try to absorb most of those costs that that we were talking about before. But there is a few things to consider. Trying to get the kids to pay for some of those costs and seeing that as an opportunity, that the equity that's available to them is the bonus, and then the parents aren't out of pocket as well. But I guess if the kids are getting the assets passed on via the estate, then there's no immediate capital gains tax implications. And again, I'm not an accountant, check this out, general only. But what they will generally do is inherit the mother's cost base if it's purchased post 1985. So the capital gains tax will occur upon sale in the future, rather than on transfer between the family. And typically the transfers via the estate are exempt from stamp duty, but again, different states. But just a couple of things to think about, right? So there are some costs, but clearly, if you were to gift your children, that does have implications to pension, because roughly about $10,000 per annum, or 30K rolling over 5 years. So what it's saying is there's a certain threshold of what you can gift your kids, and over that, it will come into your assets test and income test, which essentially means you might not be entitled to the pension for up to 5 years if you are over the means test on that. So there is a bit of planning that needs to be required, because if your parents, or your mum in this case, was expecting a $25,000 pension over that 5 years that they're not able to get it, that's $125,000 that they're not able to get access to. So you can start to see, at the end of this question, what advice would you give? Because mum is now realizing the tax implications of gifting these properties. So it's not cut and dry, and there's a lot of complexity to it, Ben.
Yeah, there is. And so, logic versus emotion is very much at play when families are talking about this type of stuff. And in some cases, there's also maybe undue pressure. I'm not, and by no means am I saying this for Rosie's case, but I'm also just highlighting that there are examples where, children are pressuring their parents to also give them the leg up, sort of a sense of entitlement, let's call it. So we've got to be very careful around that sort of financial abuse that can sometimes happen, versus what's a good financial outcome here. So there's a lot of number crunching that would need to go on in terms of that deprived asset test, and the reduction of that of the pension. It may cancel, 3 properties may cancel her out from any pension at all, as you mentioned. 1 property timed over a period, then the next property the next year, and the next, that will also have variations on that theme. So that's important. So what if the emotional side of the story gets up, we sometimes see examples where the best solution is for the kids to pay for the capital gains tax, and potentially also the stamp duty as part of that transfer. So there's no further out of costs from the parent or parents. That is one way in which we see that, and we think that's probably a fairer way. But it really is a situation where, from where I sit, I mean, I'm of the view that you teach your kids how to fish. You don't feed them fish every night, right? So my thoughts would also be around exploring ideas around parental guarantees, where the mother could say to each child, this property, and this property, you can use the equity out of these properties. I will guarantee, so you don't have to worry about paying a deposit, but ultimately you've still got to carry the can for the full debt. So in other words, I'm saying to you, you don't need to save deposit so you can get into a property yourself, but I'm going to keep these properties, and I'm going to keep them, and because it's that passive income that I was building up. I'm 74 and it sounds like I'm just finishing up the business. Now, I don't know whether there's a windfall in terms of the sale of the business. That's also something that could also be discussed with a financial planner about, being able to, if there is a financial gain, transferring that into super, and getting some advice around that, so that does give some super base. There's the option of potentially selling those properties, putting them into super, and then just supporting your kids in terms of giving them a little leg up. So there's a lot of options, but for me, I would explore this idea of doing independent guarantees, limited guarantees of 25% for the security, but the children have to basically pay for their own purchases. And ultimately, then the kids are going to get those properties bequeathed in the future. Now, because they may not necessarily then be the principal place of residence for those kids, there will be potentially a capital gains event that occurs as part of that. But all of a sudden now, those children then get a property each, and they can then decide if they do want to sell it and pay off their own mortgage, or they keep that property going and then they receive the rental income. But in most cases, there won't be any stamp duty that's payable as part of that. So again, different in each state and territory. So I like that idea because wealthy people do one thing different than other people, Rice. They very rarely sell. Right? They very rarely sell their asset base, right? So what I'd be saying is let's build from that asset base and continue to acquire properties. Let's not sell that one and start again. That to me is not good financial decision making. But I understand in certain households, people don't necessarily make decisions just based on financial logic.
Well, I think that's worth considering, right? Because let's answer in a vacuum. Rosie's mum still gets income, and we're making assumptions, but probably at least comparable to the pension. Maybe 3 properties would get you over the pension. So
one would think overs. Yeah.
Well, the assumption is right, but I've got no idea what these properties are. But the assumption is significantly over, right? So Rosie's mum, for the rest of her life cycle, has income that exceeds pension. As you said, the kids can, because the comment is, the most difficult time of their life with young kids. Sure. Does that mean that they can't get a deposit to buy, which is what you've raised? So tick, Rosie's mum has passive income. Tick, the kids have an opportunity to buy their own castle. And the last one is they have it with the security of knowing it at some point in the future, they have that luxury of that income that Rosie's mum's getting will help them retire out the debt. Or, as you said, if you don't take the advice of the wealthy and you're moving on,
and mum gets the security of health issues, but she's got something to protect her for that, and also that a bond, which are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars for aged care facilities, she's going to be covered there. The horrible thing that we wouldn't want to see there is and not in Rosie's case, but let's use a hypothetical case then. The kids all inherit a home and then they add value to it and they start having kids, and then mum gets unwell and then she needs to move into a home and all the kids are tapped out and they're like saying, we'd love to help you, mum, but we can't. And so that's not the sort of scenario that we would like to see in any situation, given how hard she's battled to and done such a great job in this particular example, and there are others out there, right? So this is why we do this podcast. We're teaching people how to fish rather than eat fish, right? So if they do it well and they start early, and their parents can help them, and we are going to see more and more of the bank of mum and dad doing the right thing, but the right thing is not to gift them properties. Technically, the right thing is to keep that asset base in the family unit and leverage from it. And in this case, that limited guarantee will be released once the children have an 80% loan to value ratio against the future properties that they buy. So I think because one of the things that's really important is we want the kids to have some accountability to their cash flows. But you're getting gifted a house, may not necessarily allow them to build the habits of saving for the future.
I want to pick up on a point you just said. Then you want to keep it within the family unit. I'm assuming Rosie's mum wants to keep it in the bloodline of the family unit. Yep. So unfortunately, if for whatever reason a relationship didn't survive, well, then clearly part of that asset gets split up as well. So if Rosie's mum wants to keep it within the bloodline, that's another way for them to think about. Slightly negative view on it, but just a reality that people need to go with their eyes wide open as well. So Rosie, hopefully that's helped. I think it's a great question. It was certainly worth unpacking, and we sought some advice. But again, at the risk of being boring, Ben, I'm just going to say it again. No way was that advice. It was just us riffing it, giving some ideas for Rosie and anyone listening to go and talk to their appropriately qualified practitioners to get some specific advice on their own circumstances. So great questions today, Ben. Good way for us to kick it off, get you back into the swing of things. My life hack today is I recently saw You can clearly see from the theme of my mindset minute, my life hack, that I'm probably looking a little bit too much at Instagram. But I recently saw a post on socials that I thought was great advice for young couples who want to have their dream wedding, but also want to get onto the property ladder. And it was simply this. The post was, why don't young couples just sell tickets to their own wedding for $200 a pop and say, the only gift we want is your presence. See more people, have the wedding you want, and save your cash to buy for your home or for your investing. So ponder the thought, Ben. And the question for you, if a young person came to you and said, Ben, I want you to come to my wedding, you and Jane, just need $200 to turn up, and absolutely categorically do not bring a gift, but that's just going to help us subsidize the event so that we can save our money. Would you do it?
100%.
Yeah, I agree.
100%. Like I mean, you know, this is where you're changing some traditions and doing a few other things, right? Some people the reason why people don't look at these things is because they're looking at how they'll be judged. You know, and so, you know, that mirror, that peer review that they're getting, you know, that's a bit rough. But the reality is you have a wedding list of things, and, you know, you sort of build out, and so some people buy this, some people buy that, and you get 2 of those and 3 of them, and, you know, so I think it's an excellent idea for money savvy people, right? You know, like, and we do know in other cultures, they get money, right? I mean, you know, envelopes of money, they get money attached to their gowns and suits, and so they've worked it out. You know, at the end of the day, the amount of money that they get really covers it. So why not just be transparent about it and say, look, it's costing us roughly a couple $100 to run the gig. Let's have a celebration. That's food, wine, and great fun, and what have you. And, you know, we'll just keep our money for a deposit for a home, and you know, keep moving on the journey that we want to move on. So I think it's definitely a more mature and sensible consideration, but it's just about getting over that obstacle of you know, how they might be perceived. And I think if you're mature enough, coming back to your question before, no, here we go. I'll link it back, see whether I'm on fire on this one, mate. When I link it back to your original life hack,
mindset minute,
mindset minute, my bad. You know, these are the people.
I like what you're about to do here.
Yeah.
As you scramble for the note. Know who to invest your time with versus who to close the account with, right? So it might just be saying to you, how material are some of your friends versus how sensible or logical are your others? Well, it continues our theme of emotion versus logic, right? On the last question that we had, and I get you breaking with tradition, and I get that there's some stigma attached to it, right? But millennials need to think, like, the biggest challenge. It's always been hard across all the generations. We've established this. That it's always been hard for home ownership, right? But now we're acknowledging that the deposit saving is abnormally hard, right?
Yep.
So all I'm saying is, and I don't expect everyone's going to do it en masse, but for some people who are not expecting a wedding where they've got cashed up parents to give them gifts, and they've got to bootstrap a wedding and a life, hey, it's just an outside of the box way to think about it. And I wonder if Stiggy, we might pose the question on socials and see if we can get some engagement from it, to see if we can get a bit of a temperature check on.
Would you go?
Would you do it? Well, more to the point, I think most people have the same attitude that you had, Ben. If you could afford $200, you'd go, right? Yeah. I don't think that's a problem, but it's whether someone feels like they could actually put on a wedding that did that as a way to serve two masters, have a dream wedding for themselves, and also get a foot on the ladder. So maybe, Stiggy, we might do that and see if we can get some engagement. We might report back. Hey, Ben, you haven't done this for a while, but mate, what's making property news?
Well, this is how unprepared I am. I'll acknowledge your great work here, my friend, in terms of pulling up a couple of these articles, given it's basically I'm second day back into the swing of things. But I did like the two that you did pick, mate. The first one, obviously, was CoreLogic reporting that the overall value of Australian residential property is hit the $9 trillion mark. I think there's a good message in that, and that was around the fact that the data in Sydney and Melbourne pretty much makes up almost half of that value, or over half of that value. And so the same sort of thing when we see CoreLogic report about property prices moving, what we are seeing really is, with 50 to 60% of that coming out of the Sydney Basin and the Melbourne property markets, if those markets are moving higher, we see the national markets move higher. If those markets are moving down, they drag the national market down. But it's testament to what we've been talking about, isn't it, Bryce, in the sense that, they are the two big knowledge centres, the big wealth centres, and that ultimately flows into the land values and the values of the improvements on that land, and that's where the capital growth comes from. So I think it's a good news story for all those people who have trusted in that knowledge that they are, terrific places to buy property.
Very well said. So there you go, folks. That's what's making property news this week. And I said at the top of the show, Ben, I was going to give you whether you are an investment or a bill. Mate, I've deliberated. You are well and truly an investment. And you knew tongue-in-cheek I was going to say that anyway, because I'm stoked to have you back. And your score on the podcast with minimal preparation has been to your usual high standard, mate. So I'd love for you to be in the co-host chair for the next 354 episodes. So
sure. Hey, can I return serve on that by saying well done to you and the team for holding the fort whilst I was out and about. You did an amazing job. Certainly, I've been able to listen to those episodes with our co-hosts, and want to thank those co-hosts and thank you for holding the ship and pointing the rudder in the right direction, mate. So well done.
Thank you, mate. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed having those folks on, but mate, I am all tongue, all out of cheek. I'm stoked you're back. I'm looking forward to what we're going to do over the next couple of weeks with the podcast, mate. But good one back, Q&A. We love it, getting the community involved with the show. So I just want to shout out to folks and say, if you do a speak pipe, you're likely to come on the show, so you get your answers quicker than if you write into me. We are methodically working through the written in questions, Ben, but I must admit I love hearing other people's voices on this podcast instead of just you and me. So that is where I'm monitoring priority. So you go to thepropertycouch.com.au, there's a little button. You can see now in a pandemic world that everyone is used to speaking online now. So it's so incredibly simple. I want to hear what your questions are, mate. But I've had to do this for the last few weeks, mate, and I sound pathetic. I sound like I'm trying to be
I disagree.
A copy of you, which I've got to have a good, long, hard look at myself, mate, but you'll do it better. So until next week.
Knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
Well said. See you next week, folks.
Hey guys, Bryce here again. Just want to catch you before you go and let you know, if you're new to our community, there are a lot of episodes to catch up on, but it's really important that you start from the very beginning at episode number 1, because episode 1 through to 20 share all of the foundational pillars and frameworks that you need to know to get the best out of listening to this podcast. So I'd recommend that you start there, and the little tip is to maybe start on 1.5 speed. Now, for those of you that are time poor and don't have time to go back from the beginning, don't worry, we've got you covered as well, because we've created a binge guide that goes through all of the details and makes it easy for you to read and get up to speed very, very quickly. So if you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/fast track, you will be able to download that binge guide and you will be up to speed in no time. And whilst you're there, I've got a few extra goodies for you, because we have our top 5 frameworks that you'll learn on this podcast, as well as the Make Money Simple Again ebook, which will help you with the foundations of basic money management, so you'll have everything you need to succeed in building your own lifestyle design and getting the best out of this podcast. Now, just a reminder that anything that we cover on this podcast is not considered financial advice. We certainly recommend that you get your unique circumstances looked at by your individual advisor, and everything we talk about is just general in nature. But folks, I want to encourage you again to go to thepropertycouch.com.au/fast track, and you can go and get all those goodies and catch up right away.